Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping into the smoky warmth of a Viking longhouse where the wind howls across frozen fjords, but inside it's cozy enough to knock you out like a baby walrus in a wool blanket. We're diving into why people from Viking times, yes, axe-swinging, horn-wearing, actually not really, sea-thinning Vikings had some of the best sleep in human history. Honestly, you probably won't survive this level of comfort. Like, if we time-traveled you into their nightly routine, you'd be snoring in 9 seconds flat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments what city are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a snowy clearing in what's now rural Norway. The air smells like pine and distant sea salt. The sky is a cold navy blue, full of stars that seem etched into glass. In the middle of this quiet darkness, a longhouse sits like a sleeping beast. Thick timber walls, thatched roof heavy with frost. Inside, a low fire glows in the hearth, and you duck your head as you enter. Warmth enveloping you like you've stepped into the middle of a wool sock. Viking households weren't just rough bunkers. These were carefully designed communal homes. You'd find a central hall with raised wooden platforms lining either side where families lay together under thick bedding. The fire pit runs right down the center, always smoldering, never completely out, so the place is warm all night, but not smoke-choked. The scent is wood, smoke, maybe a hint of herbs drying overhead. Someone's goat is snoring gently in the corner. You're already feeling sleepy, aren't you? And here's the twist. Even though life during the Viking Age was brutal, plowing fields by hand, rowing through Arctic storms, and occasionally fending off raiders, sleep was not neglected. In fact, it was sacred. After sunset, there were few artificial lights. No street lamps, no phones pinging with news about distant kingdoms, just natural, deep dark. That meant your body slipped easily into rest mode, melatonin flowing like mead. By the time evening rolled around, the entire household shifted into wind-down mode. Candles flickered in stone niches, children listened to stories about Thor and giants, curled up in bundles of fur beside them, on their parents. There was no rush to separate or isolate. Privacy didn't mean sleeping alone. It meant having a little nook, maybe a carved devid, or maybe a fur curtain. Otherwise, you were wrapped up with kin, sharing heed and safety in a dark, often dangerous world. Here's a fun detail. Vikings were really into layering. No, not just with clothing. Their bedding was layered too. Woolen blankets, fur pelts, and sometimes feather-stuffed pillows if you were fancy. Animal hides made the perfect bottom layer, insulating against the cold seeping up through wooden planks. You lay down, the fire crackling softly, your body sore from a day of actual physical labor, your belly full of stew and barley bread, and your eyes heavy. Sounds like the ultimate sleep setup, right? Scholars debate just how much of this coziness was universal. Some argue that poorer families had fewer comforts, maybe sleeping on straw mats or simple animal skins. Others suggest that even the most humble Viking homestead prioritized warmth and comfort at night because surviving the Nordic winter without it wasn't exactly optional. What's less contested is that their communal sleep culture led to longer, deeper rest. Hours and hours of uninterrupted snoozing in a society where night was not a throwaway time, but a meaningful pause. And don't forget the sounds. There's no traffic, no plumbing, no humming refrigerators, just the occasional creak of timber, maybe the wind rattling the eaves, the low breath of livestock tucked in nearby. In fact, many Viking homes shared walls or spaces with animals, not because they were weird about goats, but because those body temperatures helped heat the building. So yeah, that goat snoring in the corner, he's basically your space heater. But what really ties this whole picture together is the sense of rhythm. Viking life moved with the sun and seasons. Daylight was for work, and darkness was for sleep, or story, or singing, or dreaming. You weren't expected to be productive at midnight or respond to a torch-lit raven scroll about the next village's barley yields. Night was sacred, and the longhouse was a place of warmth and dreams. You find your place along one of the raised platforms, maybe next to a fur-wrapped old woman telling a tale about sea spirits or a warrior snoring like thunder. You pull a blanket over your chest, listen to the hiss of an ember collapsing, and close your eyes. This is how it began, the Viking night. Not a time of stress, but a time of recovery, communion, and comfort. In the next section, we'll zoom in a little more to see how the bedroom itself was set up. Because yes, these people knew how to build a sleep nook that would make Pinterest weak. The Viking longhouse doesn't just feel cozy, it's engineered for it. Tonight, as the fire glows and your breath forms soft clouds in the cooler corners of the room, let's take a closer look at the layout of where all this peaceful slumber actually went down. Because while modern homes obsess over walk-in closets and bathroom tile, back then what really mattered was how you built a sleep space that didn't let the cold kill you by morning. You shuffle quietly across the wooden planks, passing the hearth where the fire's still whispering warmth into the air. On either side of the central aisle, there are long raised platforms, benches by day, beds by night. These aren't separate bedrooms. There are no walls, no locked doors, or do not disturb signs. It's one shared chamber, and sleep is a communal ritual. The platforms are built up just high enough to avoid drafts, but not so high you lose heat. Clever, right? Most households use these raised sleeping platforms as shared family beds. One side of the longhouse might house the main family group, parents, children, maybe a grandparent or two. And the opposite side could be for hired hands, visiting kin, or, yes, the occasional livestock needing to ride out a harsh frost. Each section might be demarcated by carved beams or suspended cloth, kind of like a privacy curtain, but make it Viking chic. The message is clear. This is a society where sleeping together wasn't strange or uncomfortable. It was survival. It was community. Evenings began with bedding prep. You'd lay out heavy woolen blankets, thick, scratchy, and naturally insulating. Then came the pelts. Bear, fox, elk, maybe sheep if you were lucky. Some homes even had feather-stuffed pads, primitive pillows and mattresses that gave a surprising amount of cushion. Archaeologists have found fragments of bird feathers used for stuffing, which isn't just bougie, it's brilliant. If you've ever been under a good feather duvet, you know that stuff can trap heat like it's hoarding it for winter. Lighting was soft and low. Instead of harsh lamps, you had animal fat candles or oil lamps made of soapstone, giving off a gentle flicker. Just enough glow to see the outline of your kin beside you or trace the wooden carvings above your bed. Often symbols of protection, fertility, or animals. Some were shaped like serpents, dragons, or ravens watching from the beams above. Not creepy at all. Totally relaxing, right? The sleeping platforms weren't just functional, they were symbolic too. Sleeping higher off the ground signaled a little status. If you were the head of the household or a respected elder, you got the warmest, highest spot closest to the fire. Children might curl up toward the outer edges, often surrounded by adults like a warm human donut. And the further you were from the hearth, the closer you were to the chilly timber walls. So let's just say you really wanted to be on Grandpa's good side come winter. And there were little personal touches too. You might keep a carved wooden box at your feet, full of combs, personal tokens, maybe even a bit of jewelry. Some people hung charms above their sleeping space. Thor's hammer for protection, a sun wheel for good dreams. There's one recovered amulet in Sweden that scholars believe was designed to ward off nightmares, basically a Viking dream catcher if you think bulk-to-dystolic. Fringe fact for the win. It's around this time you realize how seamlessly the space shifts from day to night. In daylight, these platforms hold tools, baskets, maybe someone weaving or sharpening a blade. But by sundown, they're transformed into beds. The fire is banked, everyone piles under their respective blankets, and the room goes quiet, save for the occasional mutter of dreams or the sigh of logs settling in the fire. Now let's talk about ventilation. You'd think with this many people and animals breathing the same air in one giant room, it would feel stuffy. but Viking builders knew how to work airflow. Roof vents and small openings near the gables helped smoke escape while retaining warmth. Chimneys weren't a Viking thing yet, but longhouses had narrow slits that let out just enough smoke so no one suffocated, but not so much that all the heat vanished. If you've ever been in a smoke sauna or an old log cabin, you'll know that balance is everything. Still, not everyone agrees on how smoky it really got. Some scholars argue that longhouse air would have been borderline unbreathable by modern standards, especially in the dead of winter when all vents were shut tight. Others point out that Viking lungs were probably tougher than ours, and that the high ceilings and clever design kept most of the smoke above nose level. Either way, it's a far cry from the sterile white bedroom of today, but arguably more restful. No blue light, no notifications, just flickering amber.
Those Viking blankets might be cozier than anything you've got on your bed right now. You tug the blanket closer around your shoulders, and it's not some mass-produced cotton poly blend. It's dense wool woven tight, still carrying the earthy scent of lanolin. That's sheep oil, by the way. And yeah, it's a little funky, but it's also what makes the blanket water-resistant and perfectly insulating. Tonight, we're diving into the materials that made Viking bedding a legitimate sleep flex. Because, let's be real, if you had to survive Scandinavian winters without central heating, you'd want every pelt, feather, and thread nature could offer too. First off, wool was the MVP. Vikings had sheep all over the place, scruffy, hardy breeds that could handle the cold, and whose wool was thick enough to make a sail or a sleeping bag, depending on how you spun it. Women in the household would spend hours spinning and weaving for this wool into heavy blankets, not the soft, light ones we're used to today. These were thick slabs of fabric, almost carpet-like, designed to trap heat and last through years of wear. By the time night fell, each family member had at least one of these weighty, comforting covers wrapped around them. And the heaviness? That's not just for warmth. These things had the same calming effect as today's weighted blankets, grounding your body and helping it settle into stillness. The Vikings might not have had the vocabulary for deep pressure stimulation, but their sleep setup nailed it. Then came the furs, and not just for luxury, though, yes, snuggling into a silver fox pelt is as extra then as it is now. Fur was layered over or under wool, depending on the season. Bearskins were prized for their sheer size and insulating properties, but you'd also see elk, reindeer, and wolf fur used in colder regions. The hair side always faced in, pressing against your body and creating an additional heat trap. People even made fur sleeping sacks, primitive sleeping bags really, stitched from multiple hides lined with wool or feathers. If you were rich, your winter sleep looked like a mashup of nature's best: wool against the base, fur on top, feathers at your head, and possibly even another person or dog nearby to add extra warmth. Speaking of feathers, let's talk about pillows. While not every Viking slept with one, the ones who did took it seriously. Archaeological finds from grave sites in Scandinavia have included remnants of feather-filled cushions, often made from the softer down of ducks and geese. These weren't mass-produced, obviously. Each one would be hand-stitched, carefully filled, and probably considered something of a household treasure. Some theories suggest these pillows were passed down, and there's even evidence that feather bedding was included in dowries. Here's my daughter, and also the comfiest nap accessory in the fjords. Now, don't think every Viking bed was a fluffy dreamscape. Some households, especially in poorer settlements, may do with straw or haystead bedding. That might sound itchy, but they'd layer it with wool cloth or sheepskin to make it bearable. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. And in a pinch, even dried moss was used as a mattress filler. Practical, biodegradable, and probably a bit squeaky. If that's not eco-chic, what is? One of the most curious fringe facts: Viking beds might have smelled amazing. Not like department store amazing, but clean, earthy, maybe even herbal. That's because people sometimes stuffed bedding with sweet-smelling herbs like juniper, thyme, or yarrow, partly to repel lice and other pests, and partly because, hey, who doesn't want to fall asleep to the scent of forest spa? Bedding might also be smoked over the hearth to dry it out and give it a lingering woodsy aroma. You're drifting off just thinking about it, aren't you? And let's not forget the textiles that made it all possible. Women, yes, mostly women, were textile powerhouses in Norse culture. Weaving was serious business, done on massive upright looms in the home. It took weeks to make a single blanket. The woven fabric wasn't just for personal use good either. It was valuable trade currency. In fact, woven wool cloth was so precious that it became a form of money in Icelandic law. Measured in ells, which were basically Viking fabric credits, your bedspread could literally be worth more than your sword. Not to say that Vikings had a bedtime economy, but they kinda did. Of course, there's scholarly debate about how widespread the feather-stuffed comfort really was. Some argue that most people, especially not of noble status, probably slept on simpler haystead bedding, with minimal furs. Others say that even poorer families prioritized comfort at night, pooling resources to keep at least one good fur blanket for the household. What's agreed on is that whatever materials they had, they used them smartly. Layering, insulation, and shared heat were the name of the game. You shift on your Viking sleeping platform and feel the firm yet forgiving give of wool-stuffed pads under you. Your head sinks into a feather-stuffed cushion that's probably more ergonomic than your memory foam monstrosity at home. The heat from the fire reaches you in waves, filtered through pelts and planks and centuries of inherited craft. You feel grounded, wrapped in textures that took weeks to make. Each fiber chosen by hand, each fur hunted or raised with purpose. It's not sleek, it's not synthetic, but it's pure comfort, the kind that wraps your bones and tells them it's okay to let go. This was how the Vikings slept, not just to recover from the day, but to rebuild themselves physically, mentally, spiritually, all through the warmth of wool, the softness of feathers, the strength of animal hide. You close your eyes, and in that moment, it's easy to believe they slept better than we ever have. In the next section, we'll throw some sparks into this story, literally, because when you depend on a fire for heat and light, you start designing your entire sleep routine around it. Let's find out how fire, smoke, and glowing embers shaped the way they eased into rest. The fire is low now, reduced to a soft orange glow beneath blackened logs, but it's still the heartbeat of the longhouse. Tonight, you're going to fall asleep watching the flames twist and stutter, casting warm shadows across beams carved with the stories of your ancestors. The Vikings didn't just survive with fire, they harmonized with it. Everything from the structure of their homes to the timing of their sleep revolved around its flickering presence. It wasn't just heat, it was life, and it absolutely determined how and how well they slept. So here you are, stretched out beside a wide hearth that runs like a spine through the center of the longhouse. It's not like the fireplaces you're used to, those neat brick boxes on suburban walls. This is a long, shallow pit set right into the floor, fed with thick logs and kindling strategically banked before bedtime. It doesn't roar, it pulses, it breathes. Someone in the household, usually an elder or an early riser, will tend the coals through the night, keeping the rhythm steady and the heat consistent. This fire is never fully extinguished, even in the dead of summer. It's sacred and it's essential. Here's where things get interesting. The way fire interacted with Viking sleep was not just about warmth, it was about timing. The presence of low, warm light helped cue the body into natural rest cycles. Modern sleep science now talks about circadian rhythms and blue light suppression, but the Vikings didn't need lectures or TikTok hacks. They had firelight. And firelight is perfect. It's red and amber and low lumen, ideal for nudging your body toward melatonin production. No bright lights, no screens frying your eyeballs at midnight. Just the slow, dim transition from daylight to dream. The longhouse wasn't without its problems, though. Remember, this was all happening in a structure made of wood, animal hair, and open flame. Fires were both comfort and constant risk. The roof beams were dark with soot, and the air, especially in winter when the vents were shut tight, could get smoky fast. You'd wake up coughing if you slept too close to the hearth. You'd freeze if you were too far from it. So the household learned to position sleepers in layers. Closer to the fire were the young, the sick, the elderly. The strong and healthy curled up further out, wrapped in more furs, trusting their bodies and each other. Still, even with that smoky air, there was something hypnotic about it. As the firelight flickered against the walls, it would throw up shapes and patterns. Dragons flapping their wings, trees swaying in wind, faces forming and melting back into shadow. Kids might fall asleep mid-story, listening to tales while staring into those dancing lights. Adults might mutter prayers to Freyja or Odin while poking the coals with an iron rod. Dreams, it was said, could be shaped by firelight. How it moved, how it warmed, how it whispered through the dark. That's not just folklore, that's ambiance. One curious fringe fact: Viking beds might have smelled amazing. Not like department store amazing, but clean, earthy, maybe even herbal. That's because people sometimes stuffed bedding with sweet-smelling herbs like juniper, thyme, or yarrow, partly to repel lice and other pests, and partly because, hey, who doesn't want to fall asleep to the scent of forest spa? Bedding might also be smoked over the hearth to dry it out and give it a lingering woodsy aroma. You're drifting off just thinking about it, aren't you? And let's not forget the textiles that made it all possible. Women, yes, mostly women, were textile powerhouses in Norse culture. Weaving was serious business, done on massive, upright looms in the home. It took weeks to make a single blanket. The woven fabric wasn't just for personal use good either. It was valuable trade currency. In fact, woven wool cloth was so precious that it became a form.
It referenced gods, fate, or family lines. To speak the name of an ancestor out loud was to keep them present. Which means bedtime stories weren't just cute distractions. They were spiritual reinforcement, a way to remind yourself who you were, where you came from, and who would watch over you while you slept. That social aspect of Viking sleep culture is something modern researchers have only recently started to dig into. For a long time, history focused on their violence, trade, and seafaring, less on how they curled up beside their children or told tales late into the night. But now scholars are asking, how did the social fabric of Viking households influence emotional well-being? How did that deep nightly connection affect dreams, rest, or even survival? There's no clear consensus yet, but growing evidence suggests that emotional closeness, even in tight physical quarters, contributed to a stronger sense of safety and therefore better sleep. The irony: while many of us have private bedrooms and memory foam mattresses, we often sleep alone, disconnected, restless. You lie back, belly warm from broth, and your head a little hazy from the slow rhythm of communal wind-down. Someone's voice still carries through the room, telling the last bits of a myth about a mountain that ate goats. There's laughter, soft and easy. Someone reaches over and tucks a blanket over a child's shoulder. A dog shifts and lays its head on your foot. This isn't a performance, it's a ritual, and it happens every night. The Vikings might not have had Instagrammable interiors or calming spa playlists, but they had something better: togetherness. You could call it practical, sharing heat, avoiding loneliness, warding off night spirits. But that there's an emotional component too, knowing that when the world outside grows dark and wild, you are inside, in light, with others. The boundaries of your body and the boundary of the group start to blur. That kind of safety seeps into your bones and lingers long after the fire burns down. One thing modern anthropologists debate is how much of this communal sleeping was voluntary versus just necessary. Would Vikings have preferred separate rooms if they could, or did they actually enjoy the nightly togetherness? Hard to say, but based on the cultural emphasis on kinship, storytelling, and warmth, it's not hard to imagine that the nightly ritual was as emotionally fulfilling as it was functional. Maybe they didn't just tolerate the closeness, maybe they needed it. So, You stretch out a little, feeling the warmth of nearby bodies and the lull of conversation trailing off. The story fades, the fire pops, someone snores, not obnoxiously, just enough to remind you that they're there, that you're not alone, and that the darkness outside is just background noise to the little light you all keep together. And now, your body is ready, like fully, unapologetically ready for sleep. It's not some battle of melatonin supplements and white noise machines. It's just what comes next. Your head dips back, your chest rises and falls, and you let yourself drift, buoyed by the soft, unseen threads of community that are still gently humming all around you. In the next section, things get more intense, in a good way, because it's not just the social rituals that set you up for peak sleep. It's the fact that Viking days were physically demanding to the core. Let's see how rowing across icy seas and swinging an axe like it owes you money can knock a person out like no lullaby ever could. You don't just fall asleep after a Viking day, you collapse into it. Muscles aching in the most satisfying way, bones humming with that delicious earned exhaustion. Forget gym memberships and 10,000 steps a day. The Viking life was a full-body workout, from the moment the sun peeked over the fjord to the second it disappeared behind the hills. That kind of non-stop physical labor didn't just make for productive days. It primed the body for sleep so deep it could drown your dreams in it. And honestly, it might have been the best sleep aid nature ever invented. Let's rewind to earlier in the day, just before the sun reached its highest point. You've already been awake for hours. No alarm clock, just the gradual light filtering in through the smoke vents, the gentle rustle as others stir, the rhythmic shuffle of boots on packed earth. You stretched, groaned, maybe rubbed your eyes against the wool of your tunic, then got moving. No time for 5 more minutes. It's time to get to work. And work for the average Viking meant work. Heavy lifting, hard travel, and exposure to the elements. You might be plowing a frost-hardened field with an ox-drawn wooden plow, chopping down trees for firewood, hauling water in clay jars, or mending fishing nets with colding fingers. If you're a sailor or raider, you've been rowing for hours through wind and waves and freezing mist, your hands wrapped around an oar so thick it could double as a club on the wrong rhythm, and your seatmate gets a paddle to the ribs. It's a full-body coordination challenge, paired with the knowledge that if you screw up, the North Sea won't hesitate to eat your boat. These weren't just chores, they were survival. Vikings didn't have convenience, they were their own convenience. Food didn't arrive in boxes, it came from traps, hunts, and fields. Clothes didn't show up in carts, they had to be sheared, spun, woven, and stitched. Every day was spent moving, lifting, hauling, walking up hills, tending livestock, repairing buildings. There's a good chance you burned more calories just existing in Viking times than you do now on your best gym day with a personal trainer and an IV drip of pre-workout. And that's the key, because all that movement didn't just wear you down, it calibrated your whole body. By the time evening rolls around, your muscles are loose and heavy. Your blood has flowed through every capillary, and your nervous system is in that gorgeous post-exertion lull. Scientists today would say your parasympathetic nervous system is kicking in, that deep rest mode that counteracts stress and lets the body regenerate. Back then, they just called it life. Here's a fringe fact for you. Viking skeletons examined in archaeological digs often show heavy wear on joints, spines, and knees, proof of the physically intense lifestyle they led. But interestingly, many of them also show signs of long-term healing, suggesting that these weren't just people who broke down. Their bodies adapted. They recovered. They didn't just get wrecked every day. They built strength, durability, and most likely a tolerance for deep, muscle-repairing sleep. Now, not everyone had the same routine. Women, for instance, often did as much physical labor as men, just in different forms. Weaving was no dainty pastime. It required core strength and hours of standing. Cooking meant grinding grain by hand, lifting cauldrons and tending fires all day. Children started chores young. Whether that meant shepherding goats or hauling water, by dusk, no matter your role in the household, you felt it. Your arms, legs, back, all tired. Not injured, just ready to rest. Of course, some scholars question whether Vikings really had better sleep. Sure, their bodies were tired, but what about pain, infection, cold? Wouldn't all that make sleep worse? That's the debate. One camp argues that chronic aches and untreated injuries might have disrupted sleep for many, especially elders. But the other side counters that a life spent outdoors, physically engaged, and attuned to nature's rhythms might actually lead to better quality sleep, even with a few sore joints. You lying now in your fur-lined bed probably don't feel pain. You feel spent. You feel the kind of fatigue that doesn't come with a screen-induced headache or a stiff neck from sitting at a desk all day. You feel the weight of a body that worked and moved and pushed, and now your nervous system is thanking you. Cortisol levels drop, heart rate slows, muscles soften. You're not counting sheep, you're becoming one with the herd. Even the timing of Viking life supported this kind of rest. There was no up late answering emails or midnight scrolling. When the sun went down and chores were done, the body listened. It had no reason to resist. Tiredness wasn't an inconvenience. It was the signal that the day had been used well. And this physical tiredness didn't just help with falling asleep, it likely improved sleep quality. You're more likely to reach deeper stages of sleep when your body actually needs to repair itself. You sleep deeper, you dream harder, you stay asleep longer, and when you wake, it's not to the piercing shriek of an alarm clock, but to the quiet breath of a longhouse slowly stirring to life again. In the next section, things get more intense, in a good way, because it's not just the social rituals that set you up for peak sleep, it's the fact that Viking days were physically demanding to the core. Let's see how rowing across icy seas and swinging an axe like it owes you money can knock a person out like no lullaby ever could. You don't just fall asleep after a Viking day, you collapse into it. Muscles aching in the most satisfying way, bones humming with that delicious earned exhaustion. Forget gym memberships and 10,000 steps a day. The Viking life was a full-body workout from the moment the sun peeked over the fjord to the second it disappeared behind the hills. That kind of non-stop physical labor didn't just make for productive days. It primed the body for sleep so deep it could drown your dreams in it. And honestly, it might have